Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Zarov's Chess Channel, and welcome to the Clutch Chess International Tournament in 2020. It's again Magnus Carlsen versus Jeffery Xiong. In the first four games, Magnus Carlsen won 3 games, and Jeffery get only one draw. So it was a disappointing tournament so far for Jeffery. And as I mentioned in my previous video, this tournament is sort of a quarterfinal stage already. It's a knockout stage, and the players will play 12 games against each other. The first 4 games are worth 1 point per win, and this fifth and sixth game, and I'm showing you now the game 5 between Magnus Carlsen and Jeffery Xiong is worth 2 points. So if Jeffery gets maybe 2 wins now, he'll be in front of Magnus Carlsen. And then we'll have this 7, 8, 9th, and 10 game. They again are worth 1 point per win, but the 11th and 12th game are even worth 3 points. So this is really an incredible format of a tournament. I really like it. It's okay to maybe invent this kind of things, because we'll see also how players will face maybe some tension when they're maybe 2 points in front of an opponent, but then in the last game they can even lose the match game, because then in the 12th game maybe with a win you could lose the match game. Maybe you were in the lead through the whole match game, but you lost the match game eventually. So let's see now the game 5. Here Magnus played with the white pieces, and in this game I'll show you the so-called strategy of a useful move. So this is sometimes too hard to explain, but sometimes there are positions in which we basically don't like to push pawns. So we're waiting a little bit. We're playing these useful moves. We play just sort of maneuvers. We're playing just improvement of the position of pieces. We move the king somewhere. We improve the position of the rook. We maneuver the knight somewhere. We're waiting a little bit. It's sometimes a weird strategy. And I think the best player in this strategy is really Magnus Carlsen. He mentioned that one time in one of his videos, that he applies sometimes the strategy of this next useful move, and basically the player that won't have a useful move will probably lose the game, which is a really incredible thing in this strategy. But there is a problem about the strategy. If your opponent improves the position of his pieces too much, if he activates it somehow and you play just some maneuvers, and your opponent strikes suddenly, so it could be a problematic thing. So that's why you should be careful sometimes with many maneuvers. Sometimes it's really important to strike somewhere, to crack the position, to open the position. So here I wanted to show you also this very nice strategy, and also a very cool game between Carlsen and Jeffery Xiong. So let's see the game. Knight to f3 by Carlsen. He played this move also in the game 3, and Jeffery also responded with the move c5. After the move e4, we have now e6. So Jeffery went out of this canal attack, because in the last game Jeffery played the move d6, and Magnus went into this positional line with this canal attack. Here after the move e6, so far it's not possible, so we have now d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. So far the French variation, the Sicilian French variation, and now a6. We have now the Khan variation. This opening is okay. It's restricting a little bit this knight's ability to play on the square b5. But there are these problems in these types of positions. Sometimes you could have this weak square on d6 and also the weak square on b6. So in the game c4 played by Magnus, creating a so-called Maroczy bind. This idea of white is of course to grab some space in the center, and here in the game knight to f6 was played, e5. Here immediately it's not so powerful. I think black can even escape with knight to e4, knight to c5 move, so cementing the knight. So e5 is not a good move. Knight to c3, and now queen to c7. This is a common move for the Khan Sicilian. Getting the queen very active, maybe to get some kind of bishop to d6 idea, aiming against this h2 pawn, and still this a6 plays a very important role in this setup, as it restricts this knight's ability to jump on b5. So a3 played by Magnus, which is a common move also in the Maroczy bind. There are several ways sometimes to face the Maroczy bind. In most of the times you see that black will try to move a5, because the a5 move prevents a3 b4 moves, but in this Khan variation it's not possible, because this knight's activity is simply too much to handle. Knight to b5 is a serious threat. The queen gets kicked away. Knight to d6 then followed is also very, very dangerous. So that's why here basically black has to allow white to do this flank attack with the move b4. And basically what white's main strategical idea here is to play a 3 versus 2 situation on the queen side, getting sort of a pawn majority attack. Very, very often it's played in the Maroczy bind. Even if you play this move a5, I've seen many times a3, b4 possibilities in order to maybe then create a 2 versus 1 situation. So a3 perfectly fine, and after b6 we have bishop to e2, played by Magnus, bishop to b7, and now f3, a necessary move in order to protect the pawn on e4. We have bishop to e7, and now bishop to e3. Castling also by Magnus. d5 seems like a good move, but I think after c takes d5 and e takes d5, rook to c1 is a threat here. That's the problem here for black. There are some discovered attack possibilities, but if I show you really some sidelines in this particular position, I think this video will last for at least an hour. So this is really a complicated position in which basically black could even take d takes e4, and after knight takes e4 there are really some dynamics, or knight to d5 is even here a possibility. So that's why here d5 it's not such a great choice. So that's why d6, and we have now rook to c1 played by Magnus. There are also, even in this position, some knight to d5 possibilities in order to liberate the knight, but that's all possible if the knight jumps to c6. So that's why knight to d7 here played by Jeffery Xiong, and we have now b4. Now Magnus gets his goal, and this is now the position in which Magnus will play on the strategy of useful moves. So now we have b4, but it's still hard here to play some c5 moves, play some b5 moves, because if you play b5, your opponent will pass through with the move a5 and will cement his knight on c5. So that's why Magnus will play after the move rook to c8. Here that was played by Jeffery Xiong on the strategy to play useful moves. So he plays king to h1, getting this king out of the dark square, waiting a little bit, trying to see what are you going to do with your pieces, because for black it's also not easy to find here good moves. If you try to play something like b5, you lose simply the pawn. If you try to play e5 in order to kick away the knight, okay, you got a tempo, but knight to b3, and then you leave the weak square here on d5 and also weak pawn on d6. So you see, this is the strategy. We're waiting a little bit. Show me what you got. Show me first your cards, then I'll show mine. So that's why here king to h1, very often applied strategy by Magnus Carlsen. I've seen it many times. He waits like a snake and then strikes when you maybe a slight inaccuracy. Queen to d8, and now again sort of a move, knight to b3. Again, waiting move, improving the position of the piece, waiting on what black will do, and here knight to e5. This is now a useful move by Jeffery Xiong, basically improving the position of the knight, but also attacking the pawn on c4. So that's why knight to f4, played by Magnus, attacking the b6, and now we have knight to d7. So here Magnus plays queen to d4, because now the main weakness, as I said, in these count formations are this b6 and the d6. So even if you have pawns there, this are of course white's objects, and if you don't have pawns, then you have a weak square position on b6 and d6. So queen to d4, very nice move by Magnus, but here Jeffery Xiong found really a great way how to escape from this mess. He played the move b5, so attacking first this knight after knight to a5, which was a great counterattack by Jeffery Xiong. Here again Jeffery counterattacked, which was a great defensive idea. Here knight to c6, and after knight takes c6 we have bishop takes c6, and we have a new position in which the knight is attacked here by Magnus Carlsen. What to do? And here Magnus, I think, plays the main mistake, which isn't losing immediately, but gives really black great position. Here in the game Magnus played c takes b5, and what happens now is basically a new position in which Magnus Carlsen will have weaknesses, so he will have a pawn weakness. A better way here to proceed is, I think, to play simply knight to b2. So again, to play an improvement of the position of the piece, waiting, because it's not so easy now for black to take the pawn on c4, because we'll come very actively with our knight on c4 and we'll attack also this d6 weakness. So that's why this c takes b5 by Magnus was really a mistake. We have bishop takes b5 because it allows now Jeffery Xiong to get rid of his bad bishop. This bishop was really blocked out by this pawn on e4, also by its pawn here on b5. So this bishop doesn't have a good activity, and the best a better bishop is of course this dark square bishop, because still it's blocked out by this pawn on d6, but this position can be improved with potential d5 moves, and still we can maybe play something like bishop to f6. So this is not a useless bishop. Still there is plenty of room to improve this bishop. So far the bad bishop is this bishop on c8, so that's why it allows us now to improve the position of the bishop and trade it off for Magnus Carlsen's bishop on e2. So here rook takes c1, rook takes c1, here queen to d1, and now queen to c7 played by Jeffery. We have bishop to d4, and now queen to c2. Simple idea, simplifying the position. In the game, Magnus played bishop takes b5, a takes b5, and now after knight to b6, we have knight takes b6, bishop takes b6. Everything is simplified, but we have now a new position in which Magnus Carlsen has a backward pawn. So it's not losing immediately, but I'm sure that Magnus Carlsen will win 100% games in this particular position as black. So this backward pawn is a weak pawn, and the main problem about this backward pawn that it's on a dark square, so it's still vulnerable to this bishop's attacks. On the other hand, black has a pawn on a light square, so it cannot be attacked by this bishop, so it can be only attacked by the rook. And still, you see, we have now the possibility to create a pass pawn here for black, so with potential d5 moves and activating our bishop. So this is now a winning position basically for black. If black plays this endgame very correctly, it's game over here for the world champion. So rook to c3, simply attacking the pawn. Here we have rook to a1, and now bishop to f6. The main idea about this move is to create the discovered attack, and basically you cannot move the rook somewhere. If you try to hang on to this the defense of this pawn on with the move a2, rook to a2, then you get checkmated on c1. So that's why rook to d1, counter-attacking, and now rook to a3. Still, you cannot take this pawn on d6 because you get this move rook to a1. You could cover maybe with bishop to g1, but you get something like h5, and in the next couple of moves we could try bishop to g5, bishop to e3. Still a weird position here from Magnus Carlsen. We could try even here bishop to e7, attacking then here the weak pawn on b4. Still this bishop is stuck a little bit, so it's a really bad position. So that's why after the move rook to a3, Magnus gets his king on g1, so his strategy didn't work here to improve the position of the king. Basically this move king to h1 costed him the game, because Magnus needs now a new tempo. So as I said, this strategy didn't work, so king to g1 had to be played, and now rook to a6, simply attacking the bishop, and we have bishop to c7. Bishop to e5, taking the pawn is so far not possible. How to improve the position of the how to attack maybe the d6 weakness, you have to move the king somewhere. But even if you want to do that, of course first your pawn on h2 is hanging. Here rook to c1 was played by Jeffery. He's trying now to play something like bishop to d6 maybe, and rook to c8, but still you can cover with bishop to f8. The main idea is of course somehow to create a checkmate on the 8th rank, but here Jeffery played a nice defensive move, king to f8, and also activating king towards the center, because we are in endgame stage, and in the endgame you should play with your king very actively. So bishop to a5, we have d5. Very nice move by Jeffery. He is creating now a pass pawn, e takes d5, king to f1, and now bishop takes h2. So here Magnus tries to attack, but again another problem. Rook to e6, very nice counter attack. If you take, the pawn, then you get bishop to g3, and I'm not seeing a good way how to defend here. You have to again retreat with the rook, and you're gonna be probably zugzwanged here. The problem is you cannot move the rook anymore, so this bishop will paralyze your whole side on the board. So we can create here maybe a pawn storm. We could create maybe here a pass pawn situation on the h file. So it's a really weird position. So in the game, after the move rook to e6, Magnus tried g4 to create some breathing space for the king, but it allows now here Jeffery Xiong to push the pawn further. Rook to d5, and pardon me, rook takes b5, and now we have simply d3. Rook to d5, rook to d6, forcing a trade of rooks. Rook takes d6, bishop takes d6, and now b5 play by Magnus, g6. And we have b6, and now king to e8. We want to, of course, secure here that white will never promote this pawn. Maybe there are some tactical possibilities, but it's still this square on b8 is covered by the bishop, so you need the support of this bishop in order to make something happen here. So here b7, king to d7, and now bishop to b4. A simple tactic, but okay. Here Jeffery Xiong simply escapes, and we have now king to f2. We have h5, and this is very important endgame move now here by Jeffery. He's trying to create, of course, a pass pawn. We have g takes h5, g takes h5, and now bishop to e1. h4, we have king to g2, and now king to c6, attacking the pawn. We have king to h3. Here Jeffery simply takes, and here Magnus has to play king to g4. The problem is he cannot take this pawn with the king, because then you risk this move bishop to f4. So in the next move we'll simply play d2. You lose the bishop, and simply try to play maybe something like f6, and then simply support the pawn with bishop to c3. This will be game over. So for in the game, after king to g4, Jeffery played bishop to g3, and in this position Magnus Carlsen decided to resign. Nothing you can do. Still this bishop will come somehow into the game. Bishop to f2, maybe bishop to e3, and then to push the pawn on d2. In this position the world champion resigned. So here Jeffery Xiong got 2 points. In the 6th game, the game ended in a draw, so far the result is +1 for Magnus Carlsen, which isn't something that Jeffery Xiong can catch up with. So still now we have this 4 games that are worth 1 point per win, and then we're having this 2 extra games in which you can get 3 points for a win. So we'll see what will happen in the continuation of this very nice match game. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games so far. Here's the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.